Okay, so have you ever wondered like what the real nutritional differences are between meat eaters, fish eaters, vegetarians, and vegans?
Hmm.
Well, get ready, because today we're going deep into some pretty cool research from this massive study.
Oh, yeah.
It's called the EPIC Oxford study,
Okay.
and they followed over 65,000 people for over 20 years.
Wow.
Talk about a ton of data.
That's incredible.
So we're diving into an excerpt from a scientific paper that's based on this study that's published in a really reputable journal.
Right.
And it's all about like comparing the nutrition of these four groups.
Interesting.
I was kind of surprised by some of the stuff we're going to talk about today.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like which diets are actually like hitting those nutritional goals, you know what I mean?
Yes, true.
And where even the people who are eating the healthiest could maybe use a little boost.
I see.
So what's so cool about the EPIC Oxford study is how massive it is and how long it went on for. Like tracking all those people for 20 years
Right.
gives us a really solid base to compare these different ways of eating and really see what their nutritional profiles are all about.
Right off the bat, the study found some pretty striking differences in the nutrients that each of these groups are getting.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's not just about, like, what people are eating,
Right.
but the actual amounts of those essential nutrients they're taking in.
Right.
And there's a pretty clear trend here.
Yeah.
Like, vegans tend to be on one side, and then the meat eaters are at the other end,
Okay.
with the fish eaters and vegetarians falling somewhere in between.
So let's talk calories for a sec,
Go.
because this is where things get kind of interesting.
Right.
The study found that meat eaters actually had the highest calorie intake.
Uh-huh.
Then it was the fish eaters, and then the vegetarians, and then the vegans coming in last.
I see.
I used to think that vegan diets were always low in calories,
Yeah,
but this research really shows that it's not always the case.
it's not quite that simple.
No, not at all.
And then when you look at protein, it's kind of a similar pattern.
Okay.
Meat eaters had the most, which makes sense.
Sure.
But here's the thing. All of the groups met their protein needs.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So for anyone who's worried about getting enough protein if they're vegetarian or vegan, this study gives them some pretty good reassurance.
That is good to know for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's get into the fats.
All right.
There's so much talk about good fats and bad fats, and it's honestly all super confusing sometimes.
Yeah, it really is.
Well, this study actually helps to clear some of that up.
It does.
It does.
Okay.
Researchers found some interesting differences in the types of fats that people were eating, especially when they compared vegans to meat eaters.
Okay.
So vegans had way lower saturated fat intake and higher polyunsaturated fat intake compared to those who eat meat.
And why is that important?
Well, we hear a lot about how saturated fat is linked to heart health.
Ah, that's right.
And yes, so lower saturated fat is generally seen as a good thing for your heart. And polyunsaturated fats can actually have some good effects too. Like they can help lower your bad cholesterol.
Oh, wow.
So the fact that vegans have less saturated fat and more polyunsaturated fat could mean that their heart health is better.
Interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing the study found was that meat eaters were the only group that went slightly over the recommended amount of saturated fat. But it wasn't by a lot.
So are you saying that everyone was pretty much in a healthy range when it came to fats?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
The study found that almost everyone was following the official recommendations for healthy eating for all four groups.
Huh.
The only thing that was a bit off was sodium.
Oh, really?
Yeah, all of the groups were a bit above the recommended intake for that one.
Interesting.
But considering all the different ways these people were eating, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, you'd think that there'd be more differences.
Exactly.
Huh.
A lot of people think that some diets are just automatically better than others.
Yeah, that's true.
But this research really shows that as long as you're paying attention to what you're eating, you can have a healthy diet no matter what you choose to eat.
Absolutely. It's all about making smart choices that fit your own needs and preferences.
Right. And the study showed that even though all the groups were doing pretty well overall, there were a couple areas where certain diets could maybe use some tweaking.
Like what?
Well, for example, they found that the meat eaters weren't quite meeting the recommendations for fiber.
Oh, yeah. Fiber. That's the stuff that keeps things moving, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly.
We all need more of that.
And it's not just about that fiber is also important for controlling your blood sugar and even for your heart.
Oh, wow.
Wait a minute. I just remembered something else from the study.
What's that?
It talked about how even people who seem to be eating healthy could still have some nutrient deficiencies.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And didn't it mention some specific nutrients that could be a problem for each of the groups?
Yeah, it did. It's really important to remember that These findings are based on averages from this huge group of people. So everyone's needs are going to be a little bit different, and there are things to consider for each way of eating. Like, for example, the study found that meat eaters could maybe do a little better with their vitamin E intake.
Okay, vitamin E.
It's a powerful antioxidant that protects our cells from damage.
So if you're eating meat, maybe adding things like sunflower seeds or almonds could bump up that vitamin E.
Right.
Gotcha.
Now, for the vegans, they might want to pay extra attention to vitamin B12 and iodine.
Ah, yeah, those are the tricky ones.
Yeah, vitamin B12 is super important for your nerves and for making red blood cells.
Right, and it's mostly in animal products.
Exactly.
So if you're not eating those on a vegan diet, it could be hard to get enough B12.
That's why it's often recommended that vegans take a supplement.
Makes sense.
And then there's iodine.
Right, iodine,
It's crucial for your thyroid hormone.
which is important for metabolism and growth.
Exactly. Now, some plants have iodine, but the amount can really change depending on the soil.
I see. So vegans might want to think about eating foods that are high in iodine, like seaweed, or they could talk to their doctor about taking a supplement.
Good point.
Okay, so we've talked about meat eaters and vegans. What about the vegetarians? Were there any specific nutrients they need to be careful about?
Well, the study suggested keeping an eye on zinc and selenium for both vegetarians and vegans.
Okay,
Zinc is important for your immune system and for healing,
right.
and selenium helps protect your cells from damage.
Before anyone freaks out, though, it's super important to say that these are just things to watch out for, not like guaranteed deficiencies.
Right, we're just talking about possibilities here.
And this part of the study only looked at what people were eating? It didn't take into account any supplements they were taking?
That's true.
And a lot of people in the study were taking supplements.
Actually, yeah, over half of the vegans in the study said they were taking a B12 supplement.
Wow, so that really shows how important it is for vegans to think about supplementing.
It really does.
So it seems like no matter what you're choosing to eat, it's a good idea to be aware of what you're getting and maybe even take some supplements to make sure you're covering all your bases.
I agree.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to how complicated nutrition can be. What about you? Did anything really stand out to you?
You know, I think it's really interesting how this study debunks this myth of a perfect diet. It shows that healthy eating can look a lot of different ways, and everyone's needs are different.
Totally. It's not about finding this one right way to eat. It's more about understanding what works best for you.
Exactly.
What I think is really cool is how the study broke down the nutrients for each diet.
Yeah.
It showed us what each diet is really good at.
Like, for example, vegans were the best when it came to fiber. Vitamin C, vitamin E, folate, magnesium, iron, and copper.
Wow, that's amazing. I knew that plant-based diets were usually high in fiber, but I had no idea they had so much of all those other nutrients too.
And on the other hand, meat eaters had the most vitamin B2, vitamin B12, and vitamin D.
Yeah, that makes sense because those are the nutrients you mostly get from animal products.
Right.
Okay, so what about the fish eaters? What did they have the most of?
Fish eaters were the winners for calcium and selenium.
Interesting.
It really shows you that there are benefits to adding fish to your diet, even if you're not like fully pescatarian.
So we've got vegans doing really well with certain vitamins and minerals, meat eaters leading in others, and fish eaters getting their calcium and selenium.
Yeah.
Where did the vegetarians fit in all of this?
As you might guess, vegetarians were often somewhere in the middle between vegans and meat eaters.
Okay.
They had a good intake of a lot of the things vegans are known for, like fiber and folate, but they also had decent amounts of some of those nutrients that you usually get from meat, like vitamin B12.
So it sounds like vegetarians might have more flexibility with hitting those nutritional targets since they're getting things from both plants and animals.
That's a good way to put it.
I'm curious, though, were there any nutrients where it didn't really matter what diet people were following?
Actually, yeah. There weren't any big differences in sodium and potassium intakes across the 4 groups.
Really? That's surprising.
I know, right?
I would thought that, especially with sodium, the amount you eat would change a lot depending on your diet.
Like if you eat a lot of processed foods or not.
Exactly.
It just goes to show that what we think isn't always what the research says.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's also important to remember that everyone's different.
Right.
Not all meat eaters are eating tons of processed foods, and not all vegans are avoiding them completely.
Good point.
And remember, the study didn't include information on how much table salt people were using,
Oh, yeah, that's true.
which could have changed the sodium results.
Okay, so Even though there are some things to think about with this study, it still gives us some really valuable insights into these 4 ways of eating.
It really does.
It's a great reminder that there's no one perfect diet.
Absolutely not.
What's important is making good choices and understanding the good and the bad of each approach.
And making sure you're getting the nutrients you need no matter what you're eating.
Exactly. Whether you're a meat eater, a fish eater, or a plant-based eater, it's all about finding what works for you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
You know, when we started this deep dive, I kind of thought there would be like a clear winner, like one diet that would just be so much better than the others.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But I was really surprised by how well everyone did meeting those official recommendations for healthy eating.
Right?
It seems like healthy eating can look really different for different people.
Absolutely. It really challenges the idea that there's one perfect way to eat.
Totally. And what's cool is how these different ways of eating have their own strengths and give you different nutrients.
Like we were talking about earlier, vegans are killing it with fiber and vitamin C and E.
And all those minerals, too.
Exactly. And then meat eaters are getting more of those B vitamins and vitamin D.
It's like each diet has its own special power.
I like that.
But it's super important to remember that these findings are just averages from a huge study.
Right.
Everyone's needs are going to be different.
And there's situations too.
Exactly. So if you're trying to figure out what's best for you, it's always a good idea to talk to a registered dietitian or a nutritionist.
For sure. They can help you create a plan that really works for you and your goals.
This deep dive has really made me think about nutrition in a whole new way. What about you?
It's definitely given me a lot to think about.
I feel like I understand so much more about how these different diets work.
Yeah, me too.
And it's made me realize that eating healthy doesn't have to be like super strict or boring.
You don't have to deprive yourself.
Right. You can be flexible and still enjoy what you eat no matter what you choose.
The more we learn about nutrition, the better choices we can make for ourselves.
So to wrap things up, I have a question for you and for everyone listening.
Okay, I'm ready.
What's one thing you'll think about differently when it comes to food and nutrition after listening to this deep dive?
That's a great question.
For me, it's realizing that a healthy diet isn't about trying to be perfect.
I agree.
It's about making smart choices that work for you and what you like to eat.
Well said.
So until next time, happy eating, everyone.